Okay, I popped up the glossary slides, and I'm honestly I'm not going to spend much time on the glossary slides. Um, there are about 80 or so terms. These are all in the adaptive study guide. Um, and it's just a variety of terms relating to agile and agile methodologies, and they really are. This is stuff that you really need to know. These are the things that you really need to know, and I wanted to confirm that they were in the study guide. They are also the one of the keys to the flashcard things that Adaptive provides. And I don't know if you both have access to the flashcards on succeed.net. Um, if you do, they are a key resource. But if you don't have access to the flashcards, the study guide has all of these terms in them. I think they're really worth reviewing. I think if I were doing this for myself, what I probably would do is if I didn't have access to the flashcards, I would probably create some sort of flashcards for myself to be able to study these, because this is one of the keys to the exam is understanding these terms. Okay, so that's about as much of this presentation just goes through all of them. So I'm not really going to do that, but we'll put him away and go to this guy. Okay. Before I continue, was there anything that came up in the last session, or any questions about the glossary that you want to toss on the table before we go into this last set of slides, or the last hour?
No, not for
Okay.
me.
Okay. um, we've already talked about this whole slide many times before. Um, in the course of the last couple of hours, it's about really understanding that agile is a way of working. It's not the specific techniques that are involved. It's when you apply the techniques and how you apply the techniques. Um, okay, and it's the idea is if you're operating in an agile environment, what you're looking to do is to build the right products, build those products the right way, and build them at the right time when they're needed. Um, the all of the techniques that you have, that you will have, and that you can develop as a part of your toolbox are totally to get the job done the right way at the right time. Um, we're going to be we'll talk about waste and specifically address that. But one of the keys here um, to basically maximize the work that's not done. Is the way it's put. You want to be doing things that are going to create value, that are going to add value, and you want to be looking for things that are not going to create value or are not going to be effectively and efficiently using resources, and eliminate those things. Um, Again, you'll see outcome is a term that outcome and output are two terms that are key in this. Outcomes being what we're trying to achieve, the value that we're trying to deliver to the organization, and the output is the effort and the specific things that we have to do in order to achieve that outcome. The idea is to maximize the outcome and minimize the output. Oh, being agile, it's it's about being a good human being, really. It's about working together with people. It's about collaboration, clearly. but collaboration beyond collaboration in the sense of just being able to work together with people to perform tasks together. It's more about being able to understand each other and being able to be holistic about it, to understand that stakeholders have different perspectives, and we need to understand those perspectives and understand and respect those perspectives. They have their opinion. You may not agree with their opinion. They may not agree with your opinion, but the key to successful collaboration is to understand that uh, everybody that's working on a project should be of a mindset that what they're trying to do is improve the organization. The overall goal is to improve the organization, and as such, we need to involve everybody in the process. Courage. Um, I've seen recently that the most debilitating statement in any organization is "We've always done it this way," and that's key in the agile environment. We can't do it the way we've always done it. Agile development, agile methodologies are about what's working now. What are we doing that is working right? What are we doing that we could be doing differently or better? Not necessarily just differently, but better. Uh, we could be doing more of the same. We could be doing something different, but we have to be open to the idea that if we always do the same things the same way we've always been doing them before, we're going to get the same results that we got before, whether or not those results are positive or negative. Um, you could probably make an argument that says we've been successful, so we should continue doing things the way we're doing them. And yes, that's a legitimate argument, but in the agile mindset, we have to be constantly looking at things and saying, are we going to continue to be successful if we continue to do things this way? Um, do we have the possibility of being better if we do something different? Um, you know, if we're facing downturns and threats and possibilities for negative consequences, is there a way we can avoid those negative consequences? Or do we just have to live with the negative consequences? If we're not afraid to address them and say, we can take a chance that if we try something different, it may work better. That's key to being able to be agile. Um, Continuous learning. Obviously, we've talked already about feedback and incorporating feedback into the way we do things. What we do when we incorporate feedback is we're learning new things. Every time we get feedback and every time we change the way we're doing something, we've learned something new. Customer focus. Um, Again, back to the goal is to deliver value to our customers, whether those customers are external people purchasing product or services from our organization, or whether they're internal people who have to do a job. As an organization, and as certainly a software development, an IT organization, um, your goal may be to deliver the best possible tools to help your business people to do their jobs. You may have nothing to do with external customers except for as they interact with your business users. Your goal is still to provide value to your customer who happens to be your business user who's going to use the tool that your team is building for them. And value maximization, again, the best outcome with the least output. Simple statements on the agile mindset. These are again things that are core and key to certainly this course and to the agile certification. So you really need to embrace um, these aspects and understand that they are going to apply to everything that you do. Okay? Just take a look through them, read through them, and If, think about how they apply in your particular circumstance. Is this what you guys are doing? Is this what you guys are sort of tasked with? Is this what your organization is trying to do? If these are the kinds of things that your organization is trying to do, then your organization is trying to become agile. Okay. Initial thoughts on these aspects from you guys?
Pretty clean cut.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they really are. It's nice how it can all be boiled down to a small number of words. Agile is values and principles. Values, principles, attitudes. It's just, if you understand the underlying stuff, if you can just kind of integrate that underlying stuff into the way you do things, then going agile is really, it's not as much of a hurdle as people think that it is. And I think if people focused on this, if business people focused on this instead of we need to know, how do we have to do a daily Scrum meeting? Or, we can't have a business analyst on this project because we're doing it Scrum and Scrum doesn't have business analysts. Those are the kinds of things that debilitate agile transitions. If people focused on what are we really trying to accomplish here and what are the core competencies and capabilities that we need to apply to our jobs in order to be agile, it wouldn't be nearly as much of a mystery or as much of a problem. There's a lot of different flavors of agile. Um, you know, Probably the biggest one that people are familiar with is Scrum. I think somebody said to me recently that Scrum was responsible for somewhere between 40 and 50% of the Agile implementations that were currently out there. It's been really popular. I think it's been really popular because it has these specifics about it. That's a plus and a minus. I mean, if you do Scrum well, obviously you can be successful. If you just implement the Scrum, if you implement the uh, the technical aspects of Scrum, you're not going to be successful. If it doesn't have the underpinnings of the kind of stuff that we're talking about, it's you're not going to get agile just by having daily Scrum meetings, having Scrum teams in daily Scrum meetings. Um, you know, it just doesn't work that way. But Scrum is probably the most popular. Kanban is a different way of looking at things. Focuses more on exposing, providing information to the organization. I like Kanban kinds of things because of the concept of works in progress. Um, are either of you familiar with Kanban? Nope. Sounds like a nope.
No, but I'm not familiar.
Okay. Well, it basically what Kanban does is it takes the the tasks and the projects and the things that have to be done, and it kind of buckets them. So it has a process, um, and the process is very high level. Again, it can be sort of whatever you want, but the classic ones are things that need to be done, things that are being done, things that are completed and being tested, things that are deployed, and things that are blocking. So you identify those things and you flow your tasks, you flow your items through this process. But the key is that you're only allowed to have a certain defined number of tasks in any given state at any given time. So, for instance, you may say, for my development team, because of our resources, we're only allowed to be working on 3 items at a time. So, your Kanban board would look like you have a whole batch of tasks that need to be done. You have tasks that are in progress, and you're only allowed to have 3 tasks in progress at any point in time. So the only way you can make any progress is if a task goes from being in progress to its next step. To its next downstream step, and you can't take on a new task until one of those tasks moves out of your in process queue. So, and that basically provides visibility to the organization so that these are done in they do them on Kanban boards, which are just basically walls where you can move cards or however you're doing them through from one column to another column, and that basically is the way you control your work. An interesting kind of variation on Kanban that I've seen just recently. I think this comes from the guy that does personal Kanban, and I don't remember his name, but he talked about the concept of having one critical task or one critical initiative. So that critical initiative, um, if you perceive of Kanban as kind of a spreadsheet with columns and rows, and what he said was there's one row that is designated as critical. And the organization agrees that there is only one thing that can be worked on that's critical at any given point in time. So for that entire flow through whatever steps we have in our Kanban process, there can only be one item traveling that route. Everything else drops underneath it. And if somebody says, well, no, we have to do something else is critical, you don't have 2 items in the critical path. It means that the one item that was critical has to drop down into the buckets with everything else, and you can move the one thing that's critical so that it's highlighted into that critical path. And that it gives you a nice visual because you can see, okay, there's this is the most important thing that is being worked on by this group at this particular point in time. And you can see what status it's in based on the flow that you have. But Kanban it's a slightly different way of looking at things, and it's designed to make things visible. Um, extreme programming is a team programming kind of thing where we have developers working together, and each developer basically shadows and works with um, a partner, and they look at things together. And so if I'm writing code, my partner would be watching to make sure that I'm writing the code correctly, maybe testing some things that I've written, and we work together as a small team to do that. Other ones I'm less familiar with. The other ones, sorry. The other one that I am somewhat familiar with, and which I've mentioned earlier, is DSDM, which is Distributed Systems Development Methodology, which has teams somewhat similar to a Scrum team, but there were a couple of additional people that are involved. It involves a project manager. It involves a project sponsor, and so it combines some of the aspects of more standard project methodology with the agile environment. It still works on the concept of iterations, the concept of time boxes and chunking things into smaller things, but it has that project management overlay on it. But there are there are lots of different ways of doing this. Um, if your organization has one, you employ that and you look at it and you say, okay, let's keep the underpinnings of this in mind because we may determine that at another point in time we might want to modify this somewhat to go either more towards a pure project management kind of style versus a pure agile style. Obviously, when you get into the bigger and more complex frameworks, less and safe, where you're talking about coordinating the efforts of multiple agile development teams, that is simply a matter of taking the principles and saying, okay, well, in this particular case, we have an initiative that's big enough that we have a half a dozen different Scrum teams that are working on it. And in order for the initiative to be successful, the work of all of those teams has to be coordinated. So we have a framework for coordinating the work across those teams. That's what it's all about, but it's still a different flavor of agile, still based on core agile principles of delivering value rapidly, adapting and iterating. They all have the same things in common. So no matter which flavor of agile you're doing, it's looking at these core competencies, these core capabilities, and applying them to whatever framework you choose to use. Going back to this, it's business analysis. You know, BAs are humans. Um, I had an interesting conversation with one of the president of one of the consulting firms that I work for, who was talking about um, AI, artificial intelligence, in the business analysis space, and was wondering whether there's an opportunity there to apply principles of artificial intelligence in order to be able to derive requirements for projects. Either that or applying artificial intelligence to help us develop a process to do requirements elicitation. Interesting concept. I'm have a hard time thinking of Alexa as doing business analysis, but I don't know. I guess there's always a possibility that as the technology improves and increases, maybe it will be the case that an Alexa can uh, can be responsible for helping stakeholders elicit the requirements for their software projects. But as of now, it's still and even for the foreseeable future, even if you talk about being able to implement things like artificial intelligence really is still based on human principles. We're trying to teach machines how to behave like humans in many ways, and basically we're still at the point where a lot of the work that's being done is to just codify how machines can execute the things that humans could execute. They just execute them faster and more rigorously and perhaps more consistently. But they're still doing things that basically humans do. This is the Agile Manifesto, the basic premise of the Agile Manifesto, um, trying to learn how to do things better. We're looking at doing things and not just learning how to do things, because really the proof is in the pudding, is the old saying. It you know I'm not terribly good if I just know how to do something if I can't do that something. Um, yeah, this is directly from these are the key statements from the Agile Manifesto. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. If we worry too much about our processes and our tools, uh, we don't pay enough attention to the people that we're working with, and we certainly don't pay attention to working with those people, collaborating with those people. Software over documentation, um, kind of a hobby horse for a lot of BAs, because a lot of BAs work is about documentation. And I think the key here is to understand that the idea of the Agile Manifesto wasn't to eliminate documentation, it was to produce documentation that was useful. Hey, Toma left. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So the key on the manifesto is looking at building solutions. The goal is not to build comprehensive documentation; it's to build something that works. People don't get their jobs done based on documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Uh, the healthcare company that I worked for a long time was very big. The CIO was very big on, you sign the spec, that's what you get. This was almost 20 years ago, and maybe at that point in time it worked. But it's not a paradigm that is particularly successful moving forward in a dynamic environment. Even in that environment, it was troublesome because nobody ever wanted to sign specifications, because they were afraid if they signed a specification and it turned out that that wasn't exactly what they needed, that they were never going to get exactly what they needed, because he was going to say, well, that's what you signed on for. So as people started to move towards Agile, they realized that um, the goal is that we need to be producing tools that work for our customers. And just because they signed off on something doesn't mean that they knew everything that they needed to know when they signed off on it, or that something hasn't changed and now what they originally signed off for is not useful. And that was particularly true if you were talking about projects that took months to years to deliver. And responding to change over following a plan, uh, being flexible, being dynamic, instead of being hardwired into there's one way of doing things and this is what we have to do. And again, the thing to understand about the manifesto, uh, which is where it's run into problems with a lot of people, is that people have taken these as absolute statements, and that's not the purpose. The manifesto says very clearly that not that we discount the processes and tools and documentation and contract negotiation and following a plan. We just feel that those aspects are not as important as respecting individuals and interactions and working solution and collaboration and change. So, nice to take the manifesto and highlight the important parts, but not delete the unimportant parts. The BA concept model. This is the BA concept model is something out of the Babok, um, and it's interesting. This diagram over on the right hand side of the screen, there were lots of people that referred to this as the turtle diagram, because in some sense it looks like a turtle with a head, a tail, and 4 feet. But the whole concept here, we'll talk about the terms, the concepts themselves, the thing with the diagram. And
Hello, Tom.
hello, you're back.
Yeah, I lost my internet. I don't know what happened, but
Ah,
I'm back. I've been listening to you for a while.
okay,
However, I don't see the screen, so I'll try signing in again.
okay,
So I want to exit and sign in again.
okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let me just take a look at this. See if he's. Yeah, I'm gonna give him a minute or two to sign back in just to see this work. Hmm, hmm. Here he comes. Okay, okay.
I'm cool now.
Sounds like you're back. Yep.
Yes.
So, the infamous turtle diagram, and the thing about this is there are half a dozen concepts which are based on the body of knowledge, and the thing about this diagram that makes it so interesting is that it represents the fact that there are connections and communications between every pair of these concepts. So every concept communicates with or impacts or is impacted by every other concept, and that's represented by the lines in this diagram. What we've got is changes, needs, solutions, stakeholders, values, and context. And I'm nope, they don't have them. Oops, sorry, got to go back to my previous ones. Previous. You know what? I'm going to drop out of this for a second because I want to go through the definitions on these. So I'm going to pull up the good old, and I'll see if I can find the core concept model here. Hey, Tomo, you've probably seen this already because it's part of the certainly it's part of the CBAP thing. Where's my
Yeah.
concept? Where's my concept model? Oh, come on. Maybe it's better in the glossary. I'll find it in the glossary. We'll find these in the glossary. There's the six concepts, and we need to those we need to know. Simple statements. Change. A change is an act of transformation in response to a need. So you can see that already we've started to build a communication between two of the concepts. So we've got change as an act of transformation in response to a need. Context are the circumstances that influence or influenced by or provide understanding of the change. So we've got a connection here between context and change. And we get where's my I'm coming up on need here. Need, a problem or opportunity to be addressed. They didn't put in a connection to these except for that you've got the change being a response to a need. Solutions. A solution, a specific way of satisfying one or more needs in a context. So in this definition, you've got a connection back to needs and context. We're always operating in a context, so a solution always applies in a context. A stakeholder, Stakeholders are groups or individuals with relationships to the change, needs, or solutions. So we've got our connection there. And the last little bit is value. And value, the worth or importance or something to a stakeholder and in a context. So you can see that the way they've defined these things, they've basically tied them all together in this sense by the definitions somewhat loosely, but you can see that they are, um, come on, back to me. So we've got the six concepts and they all tie together and go backwards. And if you think about it, you could say, you could probably look at this and say, well, a context, certainly a context is going to be involved with changes because we're always doing changes within a context. Solutions are always within a context. Needs are always defined within a context. Stakeholders are influenced by contexts, and value is influenced by the context. And you could do that kind of connection for any one of these concepts. So they all really do tie together kind of into a nice, neat little package. Okay, now we got this is the other big thing that you're going to see a lot of over the course of this, and it is very core and key to the certification and to the whole process of agile business analysis, which are the basic principles of business analysis. Starting from the big picture, we always, in terms of a project, a product is always defined within the context of a bigger picture. So if we're building a tool is to help perform a process. The tool may not be all there is to the process, but it's a part of it. And we need to, when we're doing business analysis, we need to be aware of that. That whatever product or tool that we're dealing with has interfaces, has people or systems providing information to it, is providing information to people or systems outside of it. You'll see that in the context diagram. If you're familiar with that, it's a high-level diagram that basically inserts a process into an environment. It shows the holistically the people or data sources that interact with the specific process, and so that's the bigger picture. It shows you the bigger picture because it's not only the stuff that is internal to what we're working with, but it's what interacts with it. Think as a customer. The voice of the customer was a big Six Sigma term, and it's something that as a BA you're always seeking to find. You need to be cognizant that solutions are used by customers. Um, Customer is a generic term. It's a user. It's somebody who needs to accomplish something, accomplish a task based on the tool that they're using. They are in essence your customer, and you always need to be sensitive to their feelings about things. It reflects, there's over the course of the years a lot of effort and concern that's put into user experience, designing applications. I remember back in the day of designing websites where people were very big on making the website something that people will use. Lots of different thoughts about that, depending on what the website was doing, depending on what its goal was, depending on its customer base. I know that I had a very different way of looking at websites and their usability based on my background versus other people who had different backgrounds who approached things very differently. And this makes it challenging for everybody. So in terms of agile analysis, you need to be aware of who are the people who are going to be using and working with whatever solution you're building, and you need to incorporate their feelings and their thoughts. Analyze to determine what is valuable. Well, we're talking about delivering value. We're always talking about delivering value, so we need to be looking at things and always asking the question of, is this actually delivering value? Do we need to do this? Is this needed as a part of our process, as a part of our project? So we're always looking at that in terms of a focus of, that's a question. Get real using examples. Um, the goal for all of our projects is that the stakeholders that are involved and the customers that are involved with them understand what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it, how we're trying to address their needs. So we need to be able to practically demonstrate that to the people that are going to be using it. Pictures are nice. I have to say, but the proof is really going to be, can they actually get their job done? And we want to be all along looking at that and saying, okay, um, we need to be constantly looking at this and saying, how are we verifying and validating and proving to people that we know what we're doing and that we know what we're supposed to be doing. Understand what is doable. Accept your limitations. A project team has only so many resources, has only so many capabilities. I can remember a fight that I had with the vice president of software development that I was working for. We had a bunch of directors on the development team, and we were talking about projects. And he came to us at one point in time and said, well, we have a problem here. We just looked at the portfolio and there are 96 projects in the portfolio at this particular point in time, and 13 of them are critical. And we were all talking about this, and I tried to say to him, well, you know, how do we prioritize these projects? And he said, they all have to be done. And I said, well, but we need to accept the fact that we do not have the resources to be able to accomplish all of these projects. At some point, somebody has to say, how do we make a decision which one of these projects doesn't get done? And his answer was, no, they all have to be done. That kind of thing frequently happens in organizations. Even at the project level, it happens. And people need to understand that, you know, we there are just certain limitations. At some point, somebody has to make the hard choice that says, we have a limitation here. We can't accomplish this. That applies up and down the spectrum from the organization level down to the individual project level. That we have to understand what we can possibly do based on the resources that we have and the capabilities that those resources have. And we need to address those solutions. The lack of resources or the lack of capabilities are constraints, and sometimes we choose to deliver a solution because it's the only solution that we can deliver given the resources that we have, the time we have, the money we have, the capabilities we have. That's part of the agile business analysis, is understanding that and respecting that, assessing that and respecting it, and not just saying, well, it all has to be done and it all has to be done now. Stimulate collaboration and continuous improvement. This is about working together and constantly seeking to understand and basically work together with people, understanding that the goal is to provide the best possible solution for the people that need to use the solution. But that the people that are using the solution need to understand that there are sometimes constraints and problems on that are not specifically aware of to them, that they need to be able to accept and accommodate. So we need to be continually working together and continually trying to get better. Avoid waste. I've talked a lot about this already. You know, it's determining what's going to add value and what does not add value. Um, this key here, avoid, oops, sorry, previous. Avoid producing documentation before it's needed and just enough, particularly relevant to the BA space and the Agile BA space. Um, Doing just enough means zero is probably not just enough. There's going to be some sort of documentation that's probably needed. Maybe your stakeholders won't even understand why that documentation is needed, but you need to be able to say to them, you know, if we're going to be efficient, for instance, if we're working on a product and we know this product is going to be continue to be used and continue to be enhanced, then we need to know what that product is right now, what it does right now. The only way we're going to know that is if we have some documentation that explains that. So we're not just building the documentation at this point in time so that we can get through this project. We're building this documentation so that this product can continue to live and be enhanced and modified and updated and improved over the long haul. In
Hello,
short,
Tom.
yep.
I often wonder how requirement lifecycle management happens in Agile, especially where there is really little or no emphasis on documentation. I understand Agile talks about light documentation, and at the beginning of the project or even in the course of the project, it does not emphasize really focusing on the documentation aspect of the requirements.
That is
You know,
absolutely.
you focus on early value delivery, and possibly might look at documenting at the end of it all of the implementation. But then
Yep.
I have a problem with the fact that traceability may become
Mhm.
a challenge, because usually when you have the main requirements, probably your functional and non-functional requirements, and you use user stories as a technique for pushing this to the developers under the agile methodology.
Mhm.
A lot of times, because again we link test cases to the user stories, we link these user stories to epics, there are always a lot of links here and there.
Yep.
Now, for the requirement itself, there are usually a number of X number of use cases
Mhm.
that are part of the main requirement itself that you're trying to build. And these requirements are usually broken down into smaller bits, conveyed through user stories to the development team.
Yep.
So where there is no traceability, I really wonder what Agile seeks to achieve, where you really cannot trace like the user story to a use case, to a main document, to a main business requirement or stakeholder requirement. Something like that kind of picture. I don't know why Agile doesn't seem to address this. What do you think?
Well, I don't think that I personally don't think that Agile doesn't address this. I think
Okay.
that, and certainly as you accept the idea of the horizons that I talked about earlier, and this is core to the IIBA's perception of Agile. If you understand that strategy at the organizational level involves the creation of strategic goals, business goals, which influences the tactics at the iteration level, which are the project focuses of being able to achieve those business goals, which influence the delivery horizon, which is the production of tools, which address those business goals. And in fact, everything has to trace back to it. This is one of the big failings with software development that I've seen over the long haul, is that not enough emphasis is put on establishing a tangible business goal and then saying how are we achieving that business goal down to the level of what color buttons are on the screens on our application. Somehow that all needs to tie back together. And I think the failing is that people don't tie it back together. Not that it's not expected to be tied back together. I don't think anybody
Okay.
at the agile on the agile level, I don't think anybody's saying we shouldn't do this. I think the
Okay.
practitioners, the people who are doing agile and doing agile improperly, are the ones that are saying, "Oh no, we don't have to have any documentation. We don't. We just produce user stories and write code." Well, what do you do with those user stories once you've produced them? Aren't they a source of documentation? Aren't they a source?
Correct.
And why did you produce this user story? This user story is a part of this epic. If this user story is a part of this epic is a part of this product. This product is a part of this strategy. So it really all does tie together. The problem is in the implementation, the people who are doing it have said, "Oh, well, see, we don't need documentation because we're agile." And that's
Okay.
a complete fallacy. That's where understanding these principles, understanding the underpinnings of agile and successfully applying those underpinnings is what's going to make your organization able to say, yes, we're agile. That just means that we have user stories tied to epics tied to business cases as opposed to business requirements documents that sit in a library somewhere.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
yeah, I kind of get passionate about that one. Anyway, we're just about to the end here for today. We're talking about the principles, and waste is about doing what needs to be done and making sure that everybody understands what needs to be done, to what level of detail it needs to be done, and is cognizant that the reason that we're doing this is ultimately we're going to add value to the organization, even if we don't see what that value is right now. Somebody somewhere understands that this is valuable from the BA perspective. If you've worked on a project if you've worked on the same application a number of times, having lousy documentation for that application is a nightmare. Every time you start a project, it's like we're reinventing the bloody wheel, and we know that we have a wheel. Why didn't we just take a picture of our wheel before we started, before we started on our next project, so we would know what our wheel looked like when we started on the project, instead of saying now we have to start from the beginning again. Anyway, in this, ensuring your commitments, and one of the keys here is the last responsible moment, and this is understanding where you are and what level of detail you have to be at. So that you don't make a decision that 3 months later you're going to say, well, we haven't thought about that for 3 months. Now we have to go back and think about it again. Okay, wasteful, waste of time. Okay. Reuse things as much as possible, extend things. I like a lot of requirements management tools. I've used Enterprise Architect. One of the things that Enterprise Architect does as a repository is it allows you to make connections so that you can have successive levels of detail. Interesting and good to look for a tool in the BA space that allows you to tie things together so that you can say, I've got user stories, but I can tie the user stories back to epics. I can tie the epics back to a business case. So you want to be saying, I need to be able to go up and down the traceability tree as smoothly and as easily as possible. Unfortunate that a lot of the tools that people try to use for doing traceability are spreadsheets, which are nightmarish. If you have something, a mind map tool, so that you can just draw visual connections between things, something like that. Anything that makes it simpler so that you can see those connections and work with those connections is going to help you. Okay. making things as simple as possible, and just realizing that sometimes you have to produce things in different ways because people perceive of them and consume them differently. Um, you may need text documentation in addition to pictures. This is all stuff that's part of solid business analysis, and it applies in the agile environment as well as it applies in any other environment. Okay. We've got this is a tie together from the concept model. It has the definitions that I was looking for. It's a little bit later in the slide deck than they were. Um, yeah, this is one where I'm not so convinced on some of these things, but worth looking at. I don't think you're going to see a lot of uh, directly these things on the exam, but you will see a lot of the application of the agile principles. So you need to understand the definitions, and you need to understand the application of the principles. A little bit of that is just looking at things and thinking about them. Okay. Quick recap on the horizons. It's just about what is the focus of the particular horizon, strategy being high level, uh, initiative being tactical, and delivery being detailed, and adjusting what you do, what information you're looking for according to what you're trying to get to. The information that you need to design a screen for an application is a lot more detailed and a lot less relevant than the information that you need to make a decision on what your business goals are. You know what? We're a couple of minutes after 1. I was going to try and get to the end of this, but I'm going to hold this for because I don't want to just push through these. We can pick up the last couple of slides here tomorrow. Okay. Any quick questions or comments before we close out for the day?
Okay, not from me.
Good to go. See you tomorrow.
Okay, I'll see you guys at 9 a.m. my time tomorrow. Have a good day.
You